Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. July 9th, 2020. Dars highlights. Major themes include the Dajjal, Islam, Iman, Ihsan. The Dars began with the Shaykh's response to a question from Bangladesh, who saw the Dajjal in a vision during his istighfar in the wird. Then, when he began to invoke blessings upon the Prophet ﷺ, he saw a beautiful man from the back. He saw the back of a beautiful man, and then the man turns himself to him, and he sees the man with beautiful eyes. The Shaykh comments, the Dajjal, he has one eye, or he's blind completely from one eye, and he can see about 30% through the second eye. Muslims are in the bad habit of calling each other Dajjals, or they say so-and-so is Masih al-Dajjal when they disagree with each other. This is not permissible. There is one Dajjal, the macrocosmic Dajjal of the end times, and then there are many Dajjajil within individual souls. There is also one Messiah, one Masih, and his time is one. We are instructed by the Chosen One ﷺ to seek refuge from the trials and tribulations that is caused by the Dajjal, because his tribulation and trials are the greatest trials that this world will ever see. Now you see the Dajjal in istighfar, as you ask for forgiveness. Now, within each person, there is good hidden within them, and their inner state also comprises trial and fitna of the Dajjal. The Dajjal individually flows through the blood veins of each human being, and that flow in itself is a property of a Dajjal. However, that inner Dajjal is weaker than the macrocosmic Dajjal, and we seek refuge from the great fitna of the Dajjal. His fitna is greater than the ruse and deception of Iblis, Kaidu Iblis. Iblis manifests self-admiration and pride, and he rejects the vicegerency of Sayyiduna Adam alayhi salatu wassalam. As for al-Masih al-Dajjal, he claims lordship for himself. Iblis never went that far. He doesn't claim lordship, rububiyyah. Iblis knows Tawheed. He affirms divine oneness, and he rejects vicegerency, Khilafah. Dajjal, on the other hand, is like Fir'aun, the Pharaoh, who claims lordship for himself. And this claim, this pharaonic claim, is manifested in those who see themselves as being special, as being among the elect, khususiyah. If you see yourself as having a trait of divine election and khususiyah, then you are deprived from that very khususiyah that you see within yourself, by virtue of the fact that Allah proclaims, Rabbi yakhtassu man yasha. God singles out whomever He wills. So, instead of seeing yourself as being singled out by God, you should observe your shortcomings and deficiencies within yourself, because if you see yourself as being precious, then you should fear for your own soul in that regard. Now, Sidi is saying Astaghfirullah, and he sees the Dajjal. He is witnessing the attributes of his lower self, with its self-admiration, its false claims, its sense of being singled out and being special, claims to khususiyah. All of these negative traits of the lower self assume the form of the Dajjal that Sidi Abdullah witnesses. Even if you're not sinning, you should still remain in istighfar, asking for God's forgiveness, so that God will strip your very vision of yourself from yourself. This ru'ya that you have of your nafs is what needs to be taken away, so that the lower self may enter into a state of pure servanthood, ubudiyya. And so we clean the lower self, and we remove the attributes of claims and iddi'a from it, and we apply and instill the virtues of needfulness, iftiqar, and servanthood towards Him, and the attributes of those who prostrate in the Divine Presence. So this is the function of istighfar, and you enter with that into the invocation of blessings upon the Chosen One, as-salawat. And you see this person, a man with his back turned toward you, and you have an inspiration, an ilham within your heart, that this is the Messenger alayhi salatu salam. Then he turns to you, and you describe his eyes as being beautiful. In other words, there's a disclosure of one of the attributes of the Prophet ﷺ in front of you. This is by virtue of istighfar, which has stripped you of the Dajjal attribute within you, and has enabled you to enter into the prophetic presence by virtue of the verse, لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ. A messenger from among your souls has come to you. وَفِيكُمْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. And within you is the emissary of God. Now, returning to the fitna, God curses the one who wakes it up, as per the hadith. And the tribulations and trials caused by various nations are the fitnas of the realm of separation, in relation to the fitna of al-Masih al-Dajjal, who brings together the fitnas and trials of all of the nations within his trial. But you should look at the positive side of your sight of the Dajjal. When you enter into the wird, you're entering in a state of ritual impurity, of najasa, of sadaq, of rust. And God slowly purifies your heart. And so you enter into the Messenger ﷺ's presence with a purity in your speech, in your affirmative state, and in your actions, until your breath becomes His, and until you, as Ibn Abbas said, you see the Messenger when you look at yourself in the mirror. And so this vision that you had was given to you in order to understand the importance and value and rank of istighfar, of asking for divine forgiveness, which cleanses the fitna, the supreme fitna of the Dajjal, to say nothing of the minor fitnas. And it transfers you from an-nafsul ammara, the soul commanding onto evil, to an-nafsul lawwama, the lamenting soul, to the nafsul mulhama, the inspired soul, until you enter into ar-radiyah wal-mardiyah, the pleasing and pleased soul, and the kamila, the perfected soul. There was also a question from Oman. After Fajr, during the wird, sees himself walking through a grove of palm trees. This is a message, the Shaykh comments. It's a message from Sayyiduna Ibrahim to the nation of Mohamed ﷺ, that to invoke Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, is a plant of the gardens. You're planting trees in heaven by invoking this dhikr. This dhikr that you recite is a harvest in the garden, and you invoke it either for a wage or for increase in divine knowledge. If you invoke in order to be compensated, then you enjoy the plants that you've planted in Jannah, in the garden. If you wish to buy a plot and to become a great farmer of the hereafter, you must invoke your Lord. And the vegetation grows immediately, simultaneously with the invocation, unlike the here below, where planting and harvesting takes a long time. Moreover, Each tree, you could ride in its shade for 100 years without leaving it. You could ride under the shade of each tree. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah is one palm tree in the garden. When you say power and strength come from God alone, that's one palm tree. Now in invocation, this is what you're doing as per the Sunnah. And God shows you the fruit of your invocation in your dhikr. And you see it disclosing itself in the form of a garden of palm trees. But out of humility, we say to ourselves, it's impossible for us to ever deserve something that great. Yet it's God's disclosure upon you. It's a treasure, and you're walking through it, which means that it belongs to you. It's your plot. That's your locus and place of prostration. The Prophet ﷺ says, all of the earth is a masjid, a place of prostration for the Prophet ﷺ, and what you saw is your share of that earth. Now, what's in the trees? In your vision you say that you see the name of Allah shining in gold. One who works for a wage, an employee, an ajir, has a garden, and nobody can take that away from them, unless they themselves destroy it by sinning. However, those who search for direct knowledge, ma'rifah, they earn the same reward, they have the same compensation, in addition to direct witnessing. And so you witness the divine name, meaning that you plunge into tawheed of the names. You proclaim the plurality of God's names to be one, and it's by virtue of that that you attain this disclosure of the name Allah, because you've proclaimed the oneness of His names, and so you perceive that all names are contained within the divine name. The name Allah is a name that points to the essence, and from it the attributes and all the names split forth. All of the attributes and all the names of Allah proceed from the divine name Allah. And when that finds rest and resides in your heart and in your spirit, when you proclaim As-Sami', Al-Alim, Al-Wadud, Al-Hakim, all of them to be one, then the name Allah discloses itself to you. It's a belief that's firmly planted in your heart, the belief of Tawheed of the names. Then comes Tawheed of the attributes, and the Nur discloses itself to you, the singular Nur that flows through all the names. And when you know all the attributes are light, when you proclaim that and know that, then comes Tawheed of the divine essence. Now for those who've given their pledge of allegiance and who are traveling upon the path, they have been doing dhikr before their bay'ah. Before bay'ah, what you were doing was earning great compensation, ajr. After bay'ah, you're seeking ma'rifah. And this is where the distinction between the Muslim, the mu'min, and the muhsin begins to make itself apparent. On the Day of Judgment, all of those who have said La ilaha illallah before dying enter the garden, even if they don't understand what La ilaha illallah means. The Messenger ﷺ says, if your last word, the last one that you pronounce is La ilaha illallah, then you enter the garden. And it is for this reason that we make the person who is dying say La ilaha illallah, to give them firmness, thabat, and to keep them on the shahadas, because that is the key to the garden. Now, you're in the garden. You have your amorous peers, your hur, and your castles. But you still don't know Allah. You don't have the key to direct knowledge. You just have the key to the garden. If you wish to know Allah, if you wish direct knowledge, gnosis, you need فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Know that La ilaha illallah. You need knowledge, ilm, And how do you acquire knowledge? You acquire it by reading in the name of thy Lord. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. The name of the Lordship has to be read. Through the reading of the name, you begin to ascend. تقرأ وترتقي. You read, decipher, and ascend, advance spiritually. Some will say, oh, why all of this ma'rifah? Why ask for direct knowledge of God? Why undertake this arduous journey of suluk, wayfaring? No one told you to take it. No one told you to give your pledge of allegiance or to become a wayfarer. Just practice the pillars. MashaAllah, you will be rewarded. But do you know Allah? No. You're standing at the station of submission of Islam. Far be it for you to be in hell. Nobody said you're in the fire, because you do what God commands. But what about ma'rifah? Ma'rifah is contained in the prayer, in the fast, in the hajj, and in everything else that everyone else does. But some pray and fast and do hajj for wage and for the garden, and others who claim the station of ma'rifah, where do you place them? You place them at the station of ihsan. What about iman? Faith. That's suluk. That's the path. So for whom is ma'rifah? Not just the worshippers. Worshipping believers have a sila. Those who are just worshippers are standing at the station of submission. Those who worship with iman, they have a connection and a light, as per all the Quranic verses that ascribe light and sila to the believers. And the fruit is to worship God as if you see Him, standing thereby at the station of ihsan, at the station of worshiping God as if you were to see Him. So we're all worshiping, we're all praying, we're all fasting. No one is dividing the religion and causing new sects. This is where the confusion arises in people's minds. If you wish to worship, you're a Muslim. If you wish to work on the path, on the branches of faith, you're a Muslim with iman. If you wish ihsan, you're a Muslim who's worked on the branches of faith and is at the station of ihsan. There are three levels: Islam, Iman, Ihsan. Knowledge of the Nur requires work. The Iman, this faith, is the eye, and the Nur itself, Aynun Nur, manifests itself. Because Iman, faith, is a light that increases and decreases with righteous deeds, as per the Hadith. So you perfect your Iman, this faith, and you see God's power through all things. Now you're in a state of muraqabah, of watchfulness, and you find nothing. You are bewildered that you don't even exist. And you're bewildered in the one, the exclusive, unique one. And you're seeing nothing other than Him. Now you're standing in ihsan. Where do these different levels take place? Here, in the dunya. Some pray for compensation and reward. They earn it. Others pray knowing that the prayer is light, and they witness the light. They acquire the nur. They pass away in it and they attain it. Theirs is the prayer of the believer. Still others pray and know that they've never prayed, and they know that God's mercy discloses itself upon them through the form of that prayer. All three are praying the same prayer. Suppose that all three die on a Friday, having said La ilaha illallah. If you die on a Friday, you go to heaven as per the hadith, with no punishment. So, all three are now in their graves. The three graves are three meadows of paradise. However, the first one opens his vision and his inner vision, basar and basira, in the station of the garden. The second one opens his basar and basira in the station of the garden as well, but it's higher than that of the submitter, because there are many levels in paradise. which is why the Prophet ﷺ says, pray for Firdaus. If you ask for the highest rank in paradise. And still, the third brother opens his eyes in Jannah, in the station of Firdaus, but he adds to it direct witnessing, mushahada, and God grants him the day of increase, an extra day, beyond paradise, Yawmul Mazid. The three brothers are in the garden. They're hugging each other, they're with each other, but they're not the same even there. All three are Muslim, but they're not equal. All three in the dunya are worshipping the same, they're doing the same practices, but one worships with ignorance, the other with knowledge. So, having no ma'rifah doesn't mean that you enter the fire. But, if you have no nur, you are in darkness. You are delimited by your ignorance, even in the garden. In the garden, not knowing the Lord of the garden. That's the state of the person without ma'rifah. They don't know Rabbul Jannah. Just as now, the three brothers are in the mosque. Just as now, the entire earth is the mosque, or the place of prostration of the Prophet ﷺ. And yet, we don't know the Prophet or his Lord, the Lord of the earth. One may pray and send salawat upon the Messenger ﷺ and still be praying and doing so with ignorance. You're in the dunya and you don't know the Lord of the dunya. You don't know the rahmah onto the entire worlds. Let's suppose you know him. You must see him and witness him. A companion is one who sees the Prophet ﷺ. He's a arif of the Nabi ﷺ. Likewise, if you don't see your Lord, you're lacking ma'rifah. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك